This is Amy Dessenberg-Wines with the Iowa Coalition for Integration and Employment. I'd like to welcome you to the Iowa Employment First training series, where the rubber hits the road, Part 1, Iowa Employment Services module. We're going to start our discussion today by reviewing Iowa's employment vision. The vision states that employment in the general workforce is the first priority and the expected and preferred outcome in the provision of publicly funded services for all working age Iowans with disabilities. To support aligning Iowa's employment service system with Iowa's employment vision, in May of 2016, Iowa made changes to the Medicaid HCBS Employment Service Administrative Rules to switch the focus from a facility-based employment service model to a community-based employment service model. Today, we're going to talk about the employment service rules and services, and we're going to touch on some employment resources. We're going to start by taking a closer look at prevocational services. This is one of the areas where there was probably the most significant change from people working in prevocational services for long periods of time without an interest in moving into integrated employment. Now, the focus of the rule has changed to a community-based employment model. So let's take a closer look at what prevocational services are. Prevocational services means services that provide career exploration, learning and work experiences, including volunteer opportunities, where the member can develop non-job, task-specific strengths and skills that lead to paid employment in individual community settings. So the scope of prevocational services are that they're to be provided to persons who are expected to be able to join the general workforce with the assistance of supported employment. Prevocational services are intended to develop and teach general employability skills relevant to successful participation in individual employment. Prevocational services include career exploration activities to facilitate successful transition to individual employment in the community. We're going to talk a little bit more in a minute about what career exploration activities are. Participation in prevocational services is not a prerequisite for individual or small group supported employment services. So what's the expected outcome of prevocational services? Well, it's individual employment in the general workforce or self-employment in a setting typically found in the community where the member interacts with individuals without disabilities, other than those providing services to the member or other individuals with disabilities, to the same extent that individuals without disabilities in comparable positions interact with other persons, and for which the member is compensated at or above the minimum wage, but not less than the customary wage and level of benefits paid by the employer for the same or similar work performed by individuals without disabilities. So let's talk about a little more detail around some of the components of prevocational services. We're going to start with the settings. Prevocational services shall take place in community-based, non-residential settings. For concurrent services, that means that a member's individual service plan may include 2 or more types of non-residential habilitation services. For example, individual supported employment, long-term job coaching, small group supported employment, prevocational services, and day habilitation. However, more than one service may not be billed during the same period of time or the same hour. Some exclusions are prevocational services payment shall not be made for the following: services that are available to the individual under a program funded under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Documentation that funding is not available to the individual for the service under these programs shall be maintained in the service plan of each member receiving prevocational services. An additional exclusion is any services that are available to the individual that duplicate or replace education or related services defined in the Individuals with Disabilities Act. Additional exclusion is any compensation to members for participating in prevocational services. A fourth exclusion is support for members who volunteering for profit organizations and businesses other than those organizations or businesses that actually have formal volunteer programs in place, like hospitals or nursing homes. In addition, there's an exclusion if the support for members volunteering is to benefit the service provider. A fifth exclusion is the provision of vocational services delivered in facility-based settings where individuals are supervised for the primary purpose of producing goods or performing services, or where services are aimed at teaching skills for specific types of jobs rather than general skills. And a sixth exclusion is that a prevocational service plan with the goal or purpose of the service documented as maintaining or supporting the individual in continuing in prevocational services or any employment situation similar to sheltered employment. So if the intention of the plan is to keep people in facility-based or sheltered employment services or settings, it would not be allowable as a prevocational service. So let's talk about some limitations. Time limitations for members who are starting prevocational services after May 4th, 2016, where the new rules went into effect. Participation in those services is limited to 24 calendar months. The time limit can be extended to continue beyond 24 months if one of the following 6 components apply, or conditions apply. The first is that the member who is in prevocational services is also working in either individual or small group community employment for at least the number of hours per week that are desired by the member and identified in the member's current service plan. Number 2, the member who is in prevocational services is also working in either individual or small group community employment for less than the number of hours per week the member desires, as identified in their current service plan. But the member has services documented in their current service plan or through another identifiable funding source to increase the number of hours the member is working in either individual or small group community employment. The third area which would allow somebody to extend their prevocational services beyond the 24 calendar months is that the member is actively engaged in seeking individual or small group community employment or individual self-employment and services for these are included in the member's current service plan or services funded through another identifiable funding source and are documented in their service plan. The fourth area is the member has requested supported employment services from Medicaid and IVRS in the past 24 months, and the member's request has been denied, or the member's been placed on a waiting list by both Medicaid and IVRS. Or, number 5, the member has been receiving individual supported employment services for at least 18 months without obtaining individual or small group community employment or individual self-employment. And 6, the member is participating in career exploration activities as described as we review the career exploration activities in a moment. So those 6 areas are areas that would allow somebody to continue their pre-vocational services beyond the assigned 24 months. The second component of time limitations are for those members who were enrolled in pre-vocational services before May 4th of 2016. And that limitation is that services are limited to 90 business days beyond the completion of the career exploration activity, including the development of the career plan. The time limit can be extended, as we just reviewed, in those 6 areas that would apply, that would allow that person to extend beyond the 90 days. If, though, however, those 6 conditions, if one of those 6 conditions does not apply, the member would not be reauthorized to continue in pre-vocational services. Other considerations around pre-vocational services are that there are reauthorization requirements, that the member must engage in career exploration. If a member chooses not to pursue employment after career exploration, they have 90 days to eliminate pre-vocational services from their service plan. However, the 90-day limit after completing career exploration can be extended if Prevoc is used as a wraparound service if the individual is currently working or actively seeking work in their individual service plan, or if pre-vocational services are used as a wraparound service and can be extended in the 6 areas we just reviewed for extending beyond the timeline limitations. Let's talk about career exploration services. Career exploration activities are designed to develop an individual career plan and facilitate the member's experientially based informed choice regarding the goal of individual employment. Career exploration may be provided in small groups of no more than 4 members to participate in career exploration activities. Career exploration may be authorized for up to 34 hours to be completed over 90 days in the member's local community or nearby communities, and may include, but's not limited to, the following activities: meeting with the member and the member's family, guardian, or legal representative to introduce them to supported employment and explore the member's employment goals and experiences. Business tours, informational interviews, job shadows, benefits education and financial literacy, assistive technology assessment, and job exploration events. These are all areas that can be utilized for career exploration services, but not limited to those. What's the expected outcome of career exploration? The activity is a written career plan that will guide employment services which lead to community employment or self-employment for the member. Now we're going to talk about individual supported employment. Individual supported employment involves supports provided to or on behalf of the member that enable the member to obtain and maintain individual employment. Services are provided to members who need support because of their disabilities. The scope of individual supported employment is that employment services are services provided to or on behalf of the member that enable the member to obtain and maintain an individual job in competitive employment, customized employment, or self-employment in an integrated work setting in the general workforce. What's the expected outcome of individual supported employment services? It's sustained employment or self-employment paid at or above minimum wage or the customary wage and level of benefits paid by an employer in an integrated setting in the general workforce in a job that meets personal and career goals. Successful transition to long-term job coaching, if needed, is also an expected outcome of this service. An expected outcome of supported self-employment is that the member earns income that is equal to or exceeds the average income for the chosen business within a reasonable period of time. So let's talk about some components related to individual supported employment. Let's talk about the setting. Individual supported employment services shall take place in integrated work settings. For self-employment, the member's home can be considered an integrated work setting. Employment in the service provider's organization, not including a sheltered workshop or similar type of work setting where members are paid for the production of goods or services, can be considered employment in an integrated work setting in the general workforce if the employment occurs in a work setting where interactions are predominantly with coworkers or business associates who do not have disabilities or with the general public. Authorization for individual supported employment. Individual supported employment may be authorized for up to 40 hours or units per year initially, and an additional 20 hours or units within that year if they continue to need individual employment to obtain a job and stabilize that job. Individual supported employment is prior authorized. Let's talk about some individual employment setting or strategies. The strategies include, but are not limited to, customized employment, individual placement and support, and supported self-employment. Specific service activities are individualized and may include any combination of the following: benefits education, career exploration like tours or informational interviews or job shadows, employment assessment, assistive technology assessment, trial work experience, person-centered employment planning, development of visual or traditional resumes, job-seeking skills training and support, outreach to prospective employers on behalf of the member, such as job development, negotiation with prospective employers to customize a position, create or carve out a position for the member, employer needs analysis, or job analysis, like a work site assessment or job accommodations evaluation, identifying and arranging transportation, career advancement services, such as assisting a member in making an upward career move or seeking promotion from an existing employer, reemployment services if necessary due to job loss, financial literacy and asset development, other employment support services deemed necessary to enable the member to obtain employment, systematic instruction and support during initial on-the-job training, including initial on-the-job training to stabilization, engagement of natural supports during the initial period of employment, implementation of assistive technology solutions during the initial period of employment, transportation of the member during service hours, initial on-the-job training to stabilization activity. Let's talk a minute about self-employment. Individual employment may also include support to establish a viable self-employment opportunity, including home-based self-employment. An expected outcome of supported self-employment is that the member earns income that is equal to or exceeds the average income for the chosen business within a reasonable period of time. In addition to the activities previously listed, assistance to establish self-employment may include aid to the member in identifying potential business opportunities, assistance in the development of a business plan, including identifying potential sources of business financing and other assistance in developing and launching a business, and identification of the long-term supports necessary for the individual to operate the business. Now we're going to move on to small group supported employment services. Small group has 3 tiers. Tier 1 represent groups of 2 to 4. Tier 2 represents groups of 5 to 6 individuals, and Tier 3 represents groups of 7 to 8 individuals. Small group supported employment services are training and support activities provided in regular business industry settings for groups of 2 to 8 workers with disabilities. The outcome of this service is sustained paid employment experience, skill development, career exploration, and planning leading to referral for services to obtain individual integrated employment or self-employment for which an individual is compensated at or above the minimum wage, but not less than the customary wage, and the level of benefits paid by the employer for the same or similar work performed by individuals without disabilities. So the scope for small group supported employment services is that they must be provided in a manner that promotes integration into the workplace and interaction between members and people without disabilities in those workplaces. The expected outcome of small group supported employment services are that services are expected to enable the member to make reasonable and continued progress toward individual employment. Participation in small group supported employment is not a prerequisite for individual supported employment services. The expected outcome of the service is sustained paid employment and skill development, which leads to individual employment in the community. Other considerations for small group is the settings. Small group supported employment services shall take place in integrated, community-based, non-residential settings separate from the member's residence. Service activities. So small group supported employment services may include any combination of the following activities: employment assessment, person-centered employment planning, job placement. It's limited to service necessary to facilitate hire into individual employment paid at minimum wage or higher for a member in small group supported employment who receives an otherwise unsolicited offer of a job from a business where the member has been working in a mobile crew or enclave. Job analysis, on-the-job training and systematic instruction, job coaching, transportation planning and training, benefits education, career exploration services leading to career advancement outcomes. Other workplace support services may include services not specifically related to job skill training that enable the waiver member to be successful in integrating into the individual or community setting. Transportation of the member during service hours. Now we're going to talk more about long-term job coaching supported employment. Long-term job coaching is support provided to or on behalf of the member that enables the member to maintain an individual job in competitive employment, customized employment, or self-employment in an integrated work setting in the general workforce. There are 5 tiers under long-term job coaching services. Tier 1 is 1 contact a month. Tier 2 is 2 to 8 hours a month. Tier 3 is 9 to 16 hours a month. Tier 4 is 17 to 25 hours per month. And Tier 5 is over 26 hours per month. The scope of long-term job coaching services are that they're provided to or on behalf of members who need support because of their disabilities and who are unlikely to maintain and advance in individual employment absent the provision of supports. The expected outcome of long-term job coaching services is sustained employment paid at or above the minimum wage in an integrated setting in the general workforce in a job that meets the member's personal and career goals. An expected outcome of supported self-employment is that the member earns income that is equal to or exceeds the average income for the chosen business within a reasonable period of time. Other considerations around long-term job coaching is the setting. Long-term job coaching services shall take place in integrated work settings. For self-employment, the member's home can be considered an integrated work setting. Employment in the service provider's organization, not including a sheltered workshop or similar type of work setting, can be considered employment in an integrated work setting in the general workforce if the employment occurs in a work setting where interactions are predominantly with coworkers or business associates who do not have disabilities or with the general public, and if the position would exist within the provider's organization were the provider not being paid to provide the job coaching to the member. Service activities. Long-term job coaching services are designed to assist the member with learning and retaining individual employment, resulting in workplace integration, and which allows for the reduction of long-term job coaching over time. Services are individualized, and service plans are adjusted as support needs change and may include any combination of the following activities with or on behalf of the member: job analysis, job training and systematic instruction, training and support for use of assistive technology or adaptive aids, engagement of natural supports, transportation coordination, job retention training and support, benefits education and ongoing support, support for career advancement, financial literacy and asset development, employer consultation and support, negotiation with employer on behalf of the member, for example, accommodations, employment conditions, access to natural support, and wage and benefits. Other workplace support services may include services not specifically related to job skill training that enable the waiver member to be successful in integrating into the job setting. Transportation of the member during service hours, career exploration services leading to increased hours or career advancement. Self-employment long-term job coaching may include support to maintain a self-employment opportunity, including home-based self-employment. In addition to the activities we just listed, assistance to maintain self-employment may include ongoing identification of the supports necessary for the individual to operate the business, ongoing assistance, counseling, and guidance to maintain and grow the business, and ongoing benefits education and support. The hours of support for long-term job coaching are based on the identified needs of the member as documented in the member's comprehensive service plan. Long-term job coaching can mean long-term. Let's talk about just other considerations related to supported employment. Limitations. Supported employment services are limited as follows. The total monthly cost of supported employment may not exceed the monthly cap on the cost of waiver services set for the individual waiver program. Number 2 limitation. In absence of a monthly cap on the cost of waiver services, the total monthly cost of all supported employment services may not exceed $3,029 per month. Number 3 limitation. Individual supported employment is limited to 240 units per calendar year. Number 4 limitation. Long-term job coaching is limited in accordance with the rates and procedural codes outlined in the rules. Number 5, small group supported employment is limited to 160 units per week. Let's talk about exclusions. Supported employment service payments shall not be made for the following. Number 1, services that are available to the individual under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Again, documentation that the service is not available to the individual under these programs shall be maintained in the service plan of each member receiving individual supported employment or long-term job coaching services. Number 2 exclusion, incentive payments, not including payments for coworker supports, made to an employer to encourage or subsidize the employer's participation in a supported employment program. Number 3, subsidies or payments that are passed through to users of supported employment programs. Number 4, training that is not directly related to a member's supported employment program. Number 5, services involved in placing and stabilizing members in day activity programs, work activity programs, sheltered workshop programs, or other similar types of vocational or pre-vocational services furnished in specialized facilities that are not a part of the general workplace. Number 6, supports for placement and stabilization in volunteer positions or unpaid internships, such volunteer learning and unpaid training activities that prepare a person for entry into the general workforce are addressed through pre-vocational services and career exploration activities. Number 7, tuition for education or vocational training. Number 8, individual advocacy that is not related to integrated individual employment participation or is not member-specific. Number 9, Medicaid funds may not be used to defray the expenses associated with starting up or operating a business. Let's talk for a minute about concurrent services. A member's individual service plan may include 2 or more types of non-residential services. For example, individual supported employment, long-term job coaching, small group supported employment, pre-vocational services, and day habilitation. However, more than one service may not be billed during the same period of time, meaning during the same hour. Integration requirements. In the performance of job duties, the member shall have regular contact with other employees or members of the general public who do not have disabilities, unless the absence of regular contact with other employees or the general public is typical for the job as performed by persons without disabilities. Compensation. Members receiving these services are compensated at or above the minimum wage, but not less than the customary wage and level of benefits paid by the employer for the same or similar work performed by individuals without disabilities. For supported self-employment, the member earns income that is equal to or exceeds the average income for the chosen business within a reasonable period of time. For small group supported employment, if the member is not compensated at or above minimum wage, the compensation to the member shall be in accordance with all applicable state and federal labor laws and regulations. Finally, a few additional considerations. Community transportation options, such as transportation provided by family, coworkers, carpools, volunteers, self or public transportation, shall be identified by the members in their disciplinary team and utilized before the service provider provides the transportation to and from work for the member. If none of these options are available to a member, transportation between the member's place of residence and the employment or service location may be included as a component part of supported employment services. Personal care or personal assistance and protective oversight may be a component of supported employment services, but may not comprise the entirety of the service. And finally, activities performed on behalf of a member receiving long-term job coaching or individual or small group supported employment shall not comprise the entirety of the service. We will have a follow-up to Where the Rubber Hits the Road, Part 2, Iowa Employment Services, which gets at commonly asked questions and responses related to the rules and service definitions. Please see the Iowa Employment First training series for Part 2 of Where Rubber Hits the Road. Some Iowa contacts and resources. If you have additional questions or would like more information, you're welcome to contact me, Amy Dessenberg-Wines, and you have my phone and email listed, or Jessica Crejo, who works with the Iowa Coalition for Integration and Employment with me. Her phone number and email is listed. Also listed are Leanne Moskowitz, who's a program manager and policy specialist for the Department of Human Services Iowa Medicaid Enterprise Bureau of Long-Term Care. There's her phone number and email. Or Lynn Nibbling, employment policy specialist with Iowa Department of Human Services Division of Mental Health and Disability Services, with her phone and email information. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.